Hello, my name is Neil. This is Real Life Architecture, and welcome to this evening's live stream. I can see we've got 3 folk on already. So it is 8 p.m. UK time, Sunday, it is the 2nd of February. And I'm just going to have a chat. We've not done a live stream in quite a while. So if you're on just now, let me know, where in the world are you? Where are you located geographically this evening? Where are you watching from? It's always interesting to know where everyone is. So I haven't done a live stream in a few months. I hope everyone enjoyed their Christmas and has got over January, and we're now solidly settled into the new year, 2025. How do people feel about 2025? Is it going to be a good year, bad year, indifferent, same as last year, better? Let me know. And this evening, I just want to catch up on what's going on in the channel. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that a couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about internal wall insulation for a solid wall, and that video blew up and got over 230,000 views on YouTube. It got about 120,000 on TikTok and many more on Instagram. And of all the topics I could have thought of that might have gone viral, at least viral in terms of my channel, how to insulate a solid wall wasn't up there. But there you go. That's the wonder of the algorithm. Clearly, a lot of people out there wanted to know about insulation to solid walls. So just to give you an idea, I am going to make a follow-up to this. I am discussing a particular insulation product with a manufacturer who produces a product that is quite pricey, but also extremely high-tech and extremely thin, and it's breathable. So I'm going to make a video about that, hopefully in the next few weeks, to follow that up, because one of the main things that came out of that insulation video was, how do you insulate when you have a listed building and you have cornices and you want to actually improve the thermal performance of your older building? So I've got that in the pipeline, and I'm always open to suggestions. If there's any of you guys out there who have themes or topics or subjects you would like me to cover, please let me know. I will put them on the list. Can't guarantee when I'm going to get around to making it, but I will give it my best shot. So yeah, now we've got 6 folks. So yeah, let me know, where are you this evening? Where are you tuning in from? Let me know. Just put something in the comments, and we'll start a discussion. If you have any questions, ask me anything. Don't worry. Just interrupt. Put something into the chat, and we'll talk about it. So yeah, the channel has grown quite a bit over the last month or so because that video went viral. And I just want to say welcome to everybody, whether you're a new subscriber or you've been here since the beginning. It's almost 4 years since I started posting on YouTube. I think my first video was in March 2021. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, we're doing okay. It's cruising along nicely. And I'm also on TikTok. I'm also on Insta. So yeah, we've got DW Visual Architecture. I'm a bit further up north from yourself in Angus. Welcome. Alan B, Northwest England, but working over a much wider area. Cool. So it's always interesting to have people on board. I've been looking into the what's the best word for this? The demographics of the channel. YouTube provide me with feedback on the age, the location, the gender, etc., of people that are watching the videos, at least insofar as YouTube can guesstimate, what that would be. And it's predominantly, it's 85% male, and it's usually over the age of 35, and it's in the UK predominantly. But some videos get watched more by different groups than others, but on average across the channel, that is who watches my content. Slightly different when I'm on TikTok, in that it's slightly more female. It's like 60-40 male-female, which is, I don't know, and it's a slightly younger audience, but not by much. It's not, it's not teenagers. We're talking about people who are maybe in their mid to late 20s rather than their mid to late 30s and upwards, tend to make up the bulk of the audience there. Instagram's a strange one. I've got 18,000 and something followers on Instagram, and I'm not entirely sure I'm doing it right, because it grows very patchily. So yeah, there's that. And I tend to make my content for YouTube first. YouTube was the first social media outlet that I had, and I've added the other 2. So I make videos for YouTube, and then I will cross-post them to TikTok and Insta. And occasionally I'll make something that is unique for TikTok or unique for Insta, but it's predominantly this channel here on YouTube. So yeah, we've now got 11 people tuned in. It's 4 minutes gone. It's just after 8 p.m. I'm going to run this for an hour. I'm just going to go until about 9 p.m. UK time. So if you've got questions, put them into the chat. I'll do my best to answer them for you. And like I said at the outset, I want to welcome everybody, whether you're a new subscriber. We've got a lot of new subscribers recently, and if you've been here since the very beginning, it's great. And I'm really glad that I've got this online community basically going now. And like I said, I'm going to make a follow-up to that recent video about insulation. So I'm going to look at a product that is super thin, breathable, and ideal for older listed buildings, particularly if they have a cornice. I've been in touch with the manufacturer, and I'm going to do a follow-up on that. So that a whole discussion has to happen with that. Planning these videos, particularly when it involves third parties, like a manufacturer or a supplier, is not a quick process. If it's just me having an idea, I can sit down and start scripting it at the beginning of the week, record it on a Friday night or Saturday morning, and then put it out Saturday night. Alan B, how many projects do you take in over a typical year, and how selective are you with what you do? It's a very good question, Alan. So typically I will take on between 5 and 10 projects in a calendar year. I think I took on 8 last year, and I think it was only 6 the year before. So that's, in order to do that and still actually make a living, I have to focus on projects that tend to be, I don't know, lucrative is not the right word, but of a certain size. And I would always offer a full service. That is everything from design, planning, tendering, building regulations, construction management, and post-construction snagging, a full service right the way through. That's not to say that always happens. Quite a lot of the time, either the project will stumble somewhere, we don't get planning, or we just can't agree a price, or the client decides not to go ahead for whatever reason. And that does happen. Or sometimes the client will just manage the contractor themselves. That happens too. I have no problem with that. I will tell anyone that I'm agnostic about it, because between you and me, managing construction is the single most stressful part of the process, because that's where most of the problems come up. So if a client is willing to deal with the contractor directly themselves, fine, no problem. But to answer your question, somewhere between 5 and 10 projects in a year. And in terms of being selective, there have been times in the past, particularly just after COVID, when things started up again in like 2020 into 2021, I was highly selective about jobs because I was swamped. I had to hand over jobs to other people because I was unable to deal with everyone wanting everything done immediately after lockdown. And at that point, I think I set a £150,000 minimum floor for jobs. So if somebody contacted me and they said, well, I want to do some work, the first thing I said before I ever met them, I would just have a phone call or email exchange with them to say, thank you for contacting me, but unless your project has a budget of above £150,000, I'm not touching it. Now, I don't do that anymore. This time last year was really, there was a massive slowdown, and it wasn't just me. It was a lot of other construction companies across the UK began to experience the same thing. The first half of 2024, possibly because there was an election coming and everyone knew it and they wanted to know where they stood, and there was a big discussion around interest rates, and so people held back. And the first half of last year was particularly tight, so I would take on pretty much anything just to fill a gap. So it is swings and roundabouts, really. If I'm busy, I will be more selective. If I'm not as busy, I will be less selective. That is how that works. Santi, what's your thoughts on this whole principal designer thing? So I presume you're referring to the Construction Design and Management Health and Safety legislation, or the new English legislation that came in last year. What bill was it? The Building Safety Act. Now that applies so far just in England. The principal designer has been around 10 years now, under the CDM 2015 Health and Safety legislation, Construction Design and Management Health and Safety legislation 2015, which created this idea that if you're doing a project, pretty much any project, tiny domestic job through to a hotel or whatever, if you have more than 2 contractors, as the legislation defines them, a contractor is a business and they are operating on the building site simultaneously, you have to go through a whole series of risk assessments, create a project pre-construction health and safety risk register, and then a health and safety file has to be produced at the end of the job. And what you have 2 roles: you've got the principal designer and principal contractor. And the principal designer doesn't have to be the architect, but often is. The principal contractor doesn't have to be the main contractor, but often is. These 2 roles can be subcontracted out to specialists. And certainly for larger jobs, they often are. And even in smaller jobs, the problem I found is that particularly smaller contractors, like the stereotypical one-man band kind of operation, they don't know how to deal with this. They don't have the capacity to deal with paperwork or additional paperwork. And there's a small cottage industry and people who will fill in these risk registers and try and do health and safety files for them, which is counter to what the intent of the legislation was. It was intended to force people to stop and think about where the risks are in the design and in the construction, and how to mitigate that and plan for that, and force people to think and to not see this as a box-ticking exercise. Unfortunately, an industry has popped up that has effectively tried to turn it back into a box-ticking exercise. So yeah, we can go back and forth on this all the time, but essentially it's now a role I find myself doing quite a bit. Alan B, do you have problems getting in touch with planning officers and council planning departments? We ring. Yes. My experience has been the same as yours, Alan. You ring, you leave messages, emails, etc., and they just don't reply. Now they do reply. I've had one or two that have not replied for quite some time, but they do eventually get back in touch. Since COVID, at least my main experience is with Edinburgh City Council, but I have experience with other, surrounding areas, Midlothian, Fife, Perth and Kinross councils. But I know from my colleagues who deal with work in other parts of the UK, same issue. There's been a retirement surge. A lot of people who were in the system around 2020, 2021, who were approaching retirement for whatever reason decided, let's just go now, because I don't know why. Maybe they saw the writing on the wall. And a lot of younger people came in. And that's great. You need to bring younger people into the system. But certainly from the planning side of you, what I've found is that where previously you would have an experienced officer with 20, 30, 40 years of experience, you could meet them on site, you could hammer out what it is you wanted to do. They would say, we're not going to let you do this, but we're prepared to negotiate on the other things. You'd have a 15-minute, 20-minute discussion and it was agreed. And they go back to the office and you get the paperwork the next day. Now you have a younger person who is freshly in the door, doesn't feel empowered to make decisions. They smile and nod at you on a site and they go back to their office. And a week later, you get an email or a letter which totally contradicts what you asked for and what you assumed they were going to let you do, because a committee has sat down around a table and looked at all the applications and decided collectively that this is what they're going to approve. And it has reduced confidence in the system. That's not the fault of the people involved, necessarily the younger people. It's not their fault that they're younger people and they're less experienced and less secure in their careers. And a large number of more experienced people have recently left. So yeah, there are systemic problems in that. Building standards as well for years has been underfunded and understaffed and under-resourced, and that's not their fault. That's the fault of the system. My own view for building standards, certainly where I work in Scotland, is that each local authority should be free to set whatever fees they want. At the moment, central government tells them what they're allowed to charge. And last year they did significantly increase the fees, but it's still paltry. Like what they're charging for these does not reflect the amount of time they ought to be able to spend coming to site and inspecting things. I can't remember the last time a building standards officer appeared on site during construction and actually inspected one of my jobs. It's certainly before COVID. It has been a long time, and that's down to resources and funding. So yeah, if the fee has to go from £1,000 to £5,000 to make that happen, I am fine with that. That is not a problem, and I think the central government need to just let councils decide. Some councils that have a lot of rural areas will have different needs from a council like Edinburgh, which is predominantly all in one relatively small area, but will have a lot of building work going on in that area. So yeah, I think there's a funding crisis, there's a training crisis, there's a retention crisis, there's a retirement crisis. There's a lot going on in both the planning and the building regulation system, as I experience it at least. DW Visual Architecture. I've had issues with Edinburgh City Council as well. I think they are one of the worst performing councils in Scotland, but I think they are spread quite thinly. I don't know how they stack, relatively speaking, to any other place that I'm dealing with. I don't think they're as bad as you've described. I've found them to be largely okay. The planning system is much less communicative than they used to be, certainly as I remember it. And I've been dealing with them 20 years. So yeah, and building standards used to inspect things, but that's across the board. Building standards in multiple areas do not show up on site anymore and inspect things. They expect you to either do a video call or send them photographs. And that then leads to things being missed and then problems when you try to get a completion certificate. But they are spread thinly. That's essentially comes down to funding. It's not a moral failing or people who don't care. That's not it. They just simply don't have the funding to do what they need to do. Santi, in architecture, if found there is a wealth of knowledge in old books, can you recommend? Can I ask you a recommending reading list for architectural designer? Oh man, that's a tough one. Alan B has intervened here and says, Santi, read the Mitchell's Guide for the Technological Side. Yeah, I don't actually have that book, but I'm aware of it. And The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Yeah, I think I read that as a student. What else would I recommend? That's a very good question. What reading would I've got? I've got a whole stack of things on that shelf behind me. I have to admit I haven't touched in years, but I should probably have a good rummage through. Yeah, let me have a think about that. I will get back to you. And I have to admit, one of the best books I read, not really about architecture, but more about how the system failed, was Show Me the Bodies. It is an account of the Grenfell Tower disaster. And the chapters alternate between the events of the night themselves, which is harrowing, and going back in some cases many decades to describe how the building standards and the legislation around construction in the UK got to the point that we allowed this to happen. And the book doesn't blame any one person, organization, or group. It's a systemic failure. But the title of the book, Show Me the Bodies, is a quote attributed to but denied by a senior civil servant who was in charge of the building regulations in England, who had been apparently approached by a number of his subordinates over many years saying the building regulations have not caught up with the development in cladding material. It doesn't have an appropriate test for this new product that's on the market, which we know is dangerous, because there have been fires in the Middle East, in Dubai. There was a fire in a tower block in England years earlier where only 3 people were killed because it happened in the afternoon and very few people were home. And he kept saying, we don't need to change the building regulations because the number of deaths in house fires in England has declined over the years. But that was true, but it was nothing to do with the building regs. It's because fewer people smoked. It's because more people had smoke alarms and fewer people had chip pans, which were a huge source of fires in people's homes. And he just kept saying, yeah, show me the bodies. We'll change the regs if you show me the bodies. And that then was used as the title for the book. Like I said, he denied ever saying this. But the book, Show Me the Bodies. If you want to read something about how the UK construction industry has functioned and degenerated, and this goes for the industry, the professions, the trades, the building standards, the government, everyone comes in for criticism in that book. Read Show Me the Bodies. Cannot recommend it enough. Swinster, I'm interviewing for a local architect in Swansea, and whilst I've started watching your channel, I want to stay local. What one area would you advise a client to focus on when selecting an architect? So what one area would you advise a client to focus on when selecting an architect? So, right. I'm just trying to get my head around the question. You're interviewing for a local architect. I presume you are looking to find an architect. Is that what you're trying to get at? You're trying to find an architect for your project in Swansea. And what one area would you advise a client to focus on? If that is the question, if I've understood you correctly, shameless plug here, but my project guide, which is on the, if you go to the profile and follow my link tree, you'll see the project guide. It's available for sale for £10. It has within it step-by-step on how to draw up a shortlist, a model letter, model email that you can copy and paste, fill in the details, and a string of questions you would want an architect to answer if you're doing work in the UK to a private home, whether you're building a house, extending a house, altering, or whatever it is you're doing with a domestic property in the UK. There's a series of questions to answer. But typically, you want someone who does the kind of project. You want to find someone who's doing the kind of job that you are proposing to do, whether it's build a house, extend a house, conservation work, whatever it is. I'm not saying don't, but if you find someone for whom your job is the smallest job in the office, that could be an issue. Similarly, if you have something that's quite large and you find, say, if you approached me and with my, jobs being somewhere between £100,000 and £500,000 in construction budget, typically speaking, if you come to me with £1 million job, I may have to decline you because that could be sufficiently large and complex that I just don't feel I could take it on. So there's that. You want to find someone who's for whom your job is their typical bread and butter type of project. That's essentially that's it. Yeah. Alan B, what do you think of permitted development? I'm currently steering people away from it. Me too, as there are too many landmines. And what are your thoughts? So yeah, I did actually make a video about this, I don't know, a couple of years ago, about a number of ways that permitted development, 2 ways that permitted development can wreck your project. One being that you might get people who deliberately try to avoid the planning system simply because they fear the planning system. And the UK media never shut up about the planning system. Someone got planning when they shouldn't have, or someone didn't get planning when they ought to have, or whatever it is. There's always every month there'll be something in a media outlet in the UK talking about someone's encounter with the planning system, and it will be scandalized and hyped up. And so people have this fear of the planning system. And I have encountered any number of people who will say, oh, I don't want to go through planning. If this is permitted development, let's just get that. And they probably could get planning for a slightly larger project. The point being, they are deliberately undersizing their building because this thing, the permitted development system sets maximum sizes and heights, etc., for extensions to buildings. And they will just, make a smaller building when they could probably have gotten planning permission for something significantly bigger. And provided they are capable of paying for that, they can afford the construction. Then that's not a very clever way of approaching a project. So that's one way. The other is that people go ahead and just build something, assuming they have permitted development. But what you ought to do is you should send your drawings to the planning department and get a certificate of lawfulness, which will show, there'll be an official document saying, yes, you do have permitted development for what it is you propose to build, because the council can change permitted development guidelines further down the line. And if you come to sell your house and you say, oh, you've got permitted development, and the buyer says, well, we don't believe you, we need a certificate of lawfulness, you then, years down the line, apply to the council, and they have changed their rules. What you built may no longer be legit under the rules as that council have. And the rules that count are the rules that are enforced on the day you make the application. And there's no use showing people, here's a photograph of, on Facebook from 5 years ago when I was building this thing. It won't matter. It's the rules today, not the rules back then. So yeah, if you are going for permitted development, get a certificate of lawfulness there and then. Don't wait. But better yet, just take a punt. Put in a householder application for your extension or whatever it is, and see if you get it, rather than living in fear and getting a smaller building as a consequence. Alan B. Swinster. So yeah, Alan's helping out here this evening. I would maybe look at architects' previous completed works, regardless of where they're physically located. Good point. The physical location does matter, particularly for smaller domestic projects, and they matter because that architect may know the local planning department better than someone who has not dealt with them before, and they will almost certainly know local builders, engineers, and suppliers who can help that project. If you're looking at a significant building, if you're building a hotel or an office block, yeah, you can spread the net nationally to find yourself an architect. But if you're looking for some work to a domestic property, it's usually best to find someone local. That will they will have a network of contacts. And architects often undervalue this as a profession. We don't seem to think that matters, but it absolutely does. Being able to match the client with an appropriate builder, find a local engineer, find local suppliers, or whatever it is, kitchens, glazing, bathrooms, tiles, you name it. And I know lots of people who do these things in the Edinburgh, Fife area, and that's valuable to someone like a homeowner who has never encountered the construction industry before. That the network is actually valuable. Snazbot. Do you think it will be difficult for someone with dyslexia to become an architect? No, not at all. No, you'll be fine. As long as you know what how to deal with it, and you've got the support, you will be okay. Santi, hi Neil. I have to go. Will this live be available later? Yes, this will be recorded and posted to the channel. I think it'll probably be online by tomorrow morning. It ought to be something you can watch. So yeah, we're 20 minutes in. I'll let it run until what are we going to do? 9 o'clock UK time? Yes. So this recording will be on the channel, and there's a live stream playlist. So if you go to the playlist, you'll see live streams. It will be in there. Richard Naylor, would you advise putting small ventilation holes into the bottom of the exterior walls of our stone cottage? We have a 50 mil internal cavity and insulated timber frame. Oh man, right. So if you have seen the recent video I made about how to insulate inside a solid stone wall, which went viral amazingly, and according to YouTube analytics, it went viral because it appeared on Google. So people were typing in insulating solid walls, and my video showed up as an answer, and it got something like 230,000 views in a week, which is brilliant. And that may not be viral in the Mr. Beast sense of things, but from the point of view of my channel, that is a massive hit. That is now, I think, the second or third most popular video I've ever made on the channel, which is amazing. And I would never have predicted there would be this much interest in what seems like a fairly dry subject, how you insulate a solid wall. But to answer your question, this is a tough one, because let's just take it back. Let's say you've got a solid wall, you're going to put a cavity, and then you put the insulation inside that, which is the standard way it is recommended to do these things. Now, in the video, I go into a lot more detail about how to make breathable insulation. It's not always necessary, but I would suggest that is the foolproof way, and there's official guidance from the government which say that is the least risky way to do it, to make sure the wall is breathable, vapor open. Now, if you were building a brand new timber frame house, right, and I have made a video recently about timber frame construction, and you had a brick outer or blockwork outer leaf, you would have a cavity, you would ventilate that cavity. You would have perpend weep holes, which are about, I don't know, they're as thin as a pencil, 10 mil thin, and they're every 900 millimeters along the base of the cavity and every 900 millimeters along the top of the cavity, so that air can move around that cavity and any moisture can get out of that cavity. If you have an older building, let's say you've got typically a sandstone wall will be 450 mil thick, even 600 mil thick in some cases. I don't think there's a product on the market that will give you the small perpend sized opening that is 2 foot deep. I don't know if one exists. I don't think they do. So I don't think it's practical. And I certainly think on a lot of older buildings, it will be very obvious you've done it. It will look hideous. So the question then is it better that the wall can just breathe rather than having to ventilate? I showed a diagram in the video from the Scottish building regs showing a solid wall, cavity, insulation on the inside, but they make no mention of whether it's breathable or vapor open or whatnot. The English regs do mention vapor open, but it's just in discussion. It's not saying you have to do it. It's just there as an option. So this is a live issue, and if you see the comments on that video, there are any number of people showing up contradicting things. They were like, oh, you must have a cavity. No, don't build a cavity. Cavities are terrible. You should seal the outside. You should never seal the outside. You should just use insulated lime. Never use that stuff. It's awful. They are endlessly contradicting each other. So I am still working on better information. I am learning this as well. So it is an open topic. If your wall is typical construction, whether it's brick, it's going to be, yay thick. If it's stone, it could be yay thick. I don't think a product exists that will allow you to ventilate that cavity consistently. I could be wrong. If someone knows of a standard off-the-shelf product, you can get at any builder's merchant that will allow a cavity in a 2-foot thick stone wall or foot thick brick wall to be ventilated, please let me know. But I don't think such a thing exists. It does exist for standard brick and block construction. That's only 100 mil, maybe 140 mil at the most. Okay, so let's keep going here. I'm sorry I can't answer your question comprehensively. I just need to make you aware this is not an agreed upon. There's no agreed upon method as far as I'm aware. Here we go. Oh man, the comments are coming in thick and fast, so thank you for that. I'm going to try and get to everybody. Here we go. Swenster, think role reversal of you, my client. Richard Naylor, love your content, Neil. Thank you so much. Small point of order there, and I'm not having a go at you, Richard, and you wouldn't know this anyway, but my name is spelled Niall. And the I, it's Irish, and the I has an accent over it, not a dot. In Irish, it's called a fada. It turns the I into an E, just like in French. Spanish and German have these things too. So that is just the traditional spelling of Neil in Ireland, Ni fada All. So yeah. I get people confusing this all the time, so don't worry about it. Mo Ibrahimi, I have a rear extension. Want to add wraparound extension to the side. Currently driveway. Can I do this? Oh man, Mo, that's I don't think I can answer that question. I would need to answer that question. To even approach answering that question, I would need a lot more detail, like photographs, drawings. I could do it through a consultation on my website. If you aren't aware of that, check out the link in my profile. The link tree's in there. You can see the consultation service. But before you go to the bother of booking that, what I would suggest to do is perhaps look at your local council's planning guidance. Many, not all, councils will publish an online guide showing homeowners what you can and can't do or what the restrictions are with respect to house extensions. If you already have a rear extension, like you say in your comment, and you add to it, there's a small chance that you could be engaging in what's called overdevelopment. That is, you making the house bigger than it should be. And some things can trip you up with the planning system. One would be if, say, you have a garage and a small driveway, and you get rid of the garage as part of this development. Theoretically, you're just left with the driveway. What that means is you've reduced the parking spaces on your site. And if the extension that you've created now adds more bedrooms to the house, the number of cars you're supposed to be able to park on your property off street is a function of the number of bedrooms. So if you increase the bedrooms, in theory, you ought to be able to have parking for these cars on your street, sorry, not on your street, on your ground within cartilage. And if you do this enlargement of your house by getting rid of some of these car parking spaces, that on its own can be a problem. Other things to keep in mind is that houses will be supposed to have a certain amount of private amenity space, usually the rear garden. If you enlarge your extension significantly, you can swallow up too much rear garden, and that can be a reason for refusal. But again, I would need a lot more information than this to be able to even approach giving you adequate information. Richard Naylor, it's a savage video, Neil. I've watched it in great detail. Thank you. Very good. Alan B. Richard Naylor. So Alan, great, you're helping out this evening. Really appreciate that. Make sure your house is not listed or in a conservation zone. We have had homeowners get into hot water for even the most minor changes. This is true. Permitted development. There are some permitted development rules that apply within conservation areas. It is still possible to get them within conservation areas, but typically, if your house is in the conservation area or if it's listed, usually doesn't have permitted development rights. So always check. Your local authority will almost certainly have some kind of online information available for that. And back to our earlier conversation, it used to be about planning systems and you're not being adequately funded. It used to be possible to go into most planning departments and asked to speak to a duty planning officer. That was an officer whose job was just to sit behind a desk and take inquiries from the public in face-to-face at the planning offices, planning headquarters in the council. A lot of councils have stopped doing that for funding reasons. But if yours does, go in and book a meeting with these people and just bring in some photos and drawings and have a chat with them. That is worthwhile. Let's keep going. Swinster, DW Visual, not really, but I'm looking around. Jam Soup, that's a fantastic username, by the way. Might want to check Google search results for construction/architecture questions and see if you can make any videos from popular Google queries. Very true, yes, and I do this. I see the whole. You can take a deep dive, by the way, into how to come up with titles, thumbnails, subject matter, etc. for YouTube videos. And late last year, YouTube invited me into their content creator program, which was once a week for 11 weeks. We had a 2+ hour online video call with YouTube's own in-house experts on various things. So we had people who told us about search, about analytics, about titles, about storytelling, about presentation, lighting, audio, all this stuff. They brought in different people every week. And at the end of that, we would then have group chat among the creators who were part of that pool of people. And it was fantastic. And yeah, finding the right content, it's an ever-shifting thing, trying to get something that you think will be a high search volume search term and then to make a video about that. I hit the jackpot with that installation one a couple of weeks ago, but I did not expect that at all. I made that video because over 2 years before, I had made a short in an older building where I just walked around with my camera and filmed the installation going into that, and then I posted it, and that thing just get dozens and dozens of views every day. And I figured this is a popular short on the videos. Clearly, there's a bit of appetite for this topic. So I made a follow-up explaining that I had learned in the 2 years since I'd made that short 30-second video that I'd learned some things. So that was all it was. It was a catch-up on my own development as an architect and the knowledge I had acquired in the meantime. Billy Wong, I'm based in Livingston and at the very early stages of considering a single-story wraparound extension. Is it unrealistic to expect an architect to visit me at my home to discuss ideas for a fee? No, it's not. I mean, personally, you're not that far from where I'm based. The process for me, for when a client approaches me, is they'll usually email me. Sometimes they phone me and they'll say, hey, look, we're looking at doing this project. Is it something you could help us with? The first thing I do is arrange a phone or video call with them, 10-15 minutes. And I'm going to want to know what their construction budget is and what their expectations on timescale. I'd like, if we can, to get some photos or floor plans of their house, and estate agents listings are great. And I've been doing these for years, and that is from that was my brother-in-law suggested I could turn that into a business rather than just staying within sort of the Edinburgh area. I could then offer that as a service across the UK through Real Life Architecture, which is where the consultations came from. So I would always start with having a chat. And sometimes, people's budget just isn't realistic, or it won't match their aspirations, or there's some other thing going on, such as they want to build something that I think stands very little chance of getting planning, or it contravenes the building regs or whatever. And I would try and hammer that out. And if the client either A, can find more money or can downgrade their expectations, we can meet in the middle and then we can get this to work. If I think that it's a viable project, I will then go and meet them at their house, usually for an hour, usually for free. So that's me. That's me interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me. It's me to see what's going on here. Is this viable? Is this realistic? And if it is, then I'll offer them a fee quote off the back of that. So that's how that works. Sometimes on online consultations, people can give me enough information. If it's in the Edinburgh area and I have a Zoom call with them, I can see there's floor plans and there's photographs, and we have a chat for 15-20 minutes. There's sometimes enough information there for me to be able to give them a provisional fee quote, whereby I will say, this is what I will charge you, but I'm going to need to go to your house at, first thing. And if I go to your house and we discover something that isn't in those photographs that we have of your house, or there's some element of this project that wasn't discussed or apparent when we had our chat, then I may have to revise my fee. So that's how that works, just so you know. But yeah, you ought to be able to find an architect in that area. I know architects personally who are in the West Lothian area. You will have no problem finding people. And I'm pretty sure they would at least have a phone or video call with you to go over what it is you want to do. Thereafter, it's up to them. Alan B, do you create 3D images / models for your projects yourself, or do you outsource it? I do it myself. I use SketchUp, and I don't do it for every project. I do it sometimes if there's something complex. I did one the week before last, for a stairs inside a 200-year-old house. If you've been watching the channel, I've made some shorts about this, about the sash and case windows being refurbished and other parts of the building, under construction. But we are putting a stairs into this old house where there was not one previously. And it's going to be fantastic when it's done. But I had to make a 3D model of this because the design involves a number of different materials. We've got stone step. The first 2 steps are stone, and then everything after is oak, and it's open thread, so you can see through, because there's 2 very large sash and case windows at the back end of this space. We're going to flood the place with light. The handrail is bespoke. And there's timber cladding up from the floor up to the handrail, and then it's plasterboard above that. So it's a relatively complex design. I'm not able to share screen with you. If I was, I could show you this, but that's an example of why I would use 3D to try and explain it to the client and the contractor. Or sometimes if we're doing an extension that has a complex, lots of materials for whatever reason, or it's a complex shape, I would do it to explain it but first of all to myself, so I could try and understand what I'm building here, and I will then use that as a design tool. I'll evolve the design as I go, and then we'll talk it through with the client, get feedback, and this thing evolves as we go through a process. And eventually we have to explain it to the neighbors and to the planning department and to the contractor and to the engineer. So a 3D model is useful, but not every project is sufficiently complex to require it to be done. But I do it myself. Let's see who's next. Richard Naylor. Thanks, Neil. And yes, you spelled my name. Thank you. I appreciate that it's a very dynamic issue in terms of wall thickness, weather, environment, availability of product to suit. In our case, we're 450 mil thick field stone. Yeah, 450, 1.5 feet, 18 inches is a standard thickness for stone walls in the UK. Maybe internationally, I don't know. But yeah, I've seen them 2 feet thick in the past, often at the base of larger buildings. If they're going up, say, 4 stories or more, something, they've had thicker walls and they got thinner as they built up. But for most, say, 1-2 story houses, 450 mil, 18 inches seems to be what's normally built. But again, if you have a cavity in the inside of that, I don't know how you would ventilate that effectively, or I don't know if a product that is available that would give you, no matter where you're building, it will always work. I don't know if that exists, which is why I think a vapor open insulation solution is better. Mo Ibrahimi, thank you very much. Very informative. Appreciate. Excellent content. No problem. Mo, glad you liked it. Alan B, do you bother with applications in principle? I think they're a waste of time and money, but what is your experience? Applications, yeah, right. Okay, so planning in principle. So if this is application in principle, sometimes called outline planning applications, they are often used by people who are wanting to sell a site. I see them in my consultations all the time, where people are looking to buy a plot of land and it comes with planning in principle. And in some cases, I have looked at these and I am skeptical, because what happens if you have, say, a plot of land and you want to see if you can get a house built on it, and that would massively increase the value of the land. It's quite expensive and time consuming to get a full planning application approved. But there's a lesser option, which is the planning in principle or outline planning application. And the planners ask fewer questions. And if you get this approved, you still have to go through the full planning process, which will cost you more and take you longer and have more hurdles to clear. So it's there. I don't know if it's there for that reason, but that's commonly how it's used. And if I was advising a client who was looking to actually go ahead with construction, there's no point doing that. What you would be better advised doing is doing pre-application discussion. So if you want to build something, or like a house on a site, before you put in the planning application, go have a pre-application discussion. And again, back to our earlier chat at the beginning of the video about planning departments and their funding. And Edinburgh, whom I deal with most frequently, have stopped doing pre-application discussions for anything other than larger developments. And it is unclear whether that means a one-off house or it's a developer wanting to build a larger building, or maybe multiple homes. So your local authority may not actually do pre-application discussions. So keep that in mind. But yeah, if you are serious about building a house, pre-application discussion before your full planning application. If you're buying a plot of land, at the very least, I would say don't buy it unless it has outline planning permission. And before you buy it, talk to someone like me, get a consultation to see, are there things that might not have been asked for in that outline or planning in principle, that will be asked for in a full planning application, which it looks as though the site may not be able to satisfy. Things like drainage, proper road access, other things like that are not asked for as part of the planning in principle, but are going to be required for a full planning application, because it is possible to get planning in principle approved on a site that stands no chance of getting a full planning application approved, at least in my experience. I hope that answers the question, Alan. Snazbot, thank you for answering my previous question. What do you think would fix Ireland's housing crisis the quickest? I am Irish, but I left Ireland in 1998. I haven't lived there since. I did work in the summer of 1999 on building sites in Dublin. So yeah, I suppose it's been 26 years since I've lived in Ireland. And I don't know enough to be able to give you that question. But I know there's a housing crisis in Ireland. There is one in the UK as well. I think it comes down to supply and demand, and also building homes in the places where they're actually needed. And at least in the UK, my answer would be, I think the government needs to directly intervene in the housing industry, and not by outsourcing it, by getting other people to build it. The UK government should actually directly procure land and directly hire and employ people to build it, and have a full-time government-funded construction arm, or at the very least try to get councils building homes again. You can scream at me in the comments and say I'm a raving socialist for saying that, but I think realistically we've tried it the open market, free market way, and it hasn't worked. So I think you do need direct, straight intervention, state intervention in the housing sector to get this problem solved. That's my view. So, Christopher McKay, genuine question. Why can't you have 240-volt sockets in a bathroom placed certain distance from wet areas, considering ceiling lights, wall lights, and extraction fans are 240 already? Good question. I don't know is the short answer. I know in Europe, it is possible to have electrics in a bathroom, and I think there's a certain distance. I don't know what it is, but there's a distance between the sink, specifically the wash basin, and the electrical outlet, so that you can't actually touch two at the same time. I think that's what it is. But I know that the people in the UK who make guidance for electricians have these rules, but it's not something I directly engage with. I would just put down the typical British standard. There is guidance in the building regulations with respect to electrics, but I don't pretend to be an expert on it. As long as in the UK, electrics are certified by a qualified electrician, and as long as I get that electrician's certificate at the end of a job, that's it. It's been certified, and the electrician has to personally sign it. It's not signed by a company; it's signed by an individual, so that if it ever goes wrong, there's actual individual responsibility. So I don't know why is the answer, but from my point of view as an architect, I just get a certificate from a suitably qualified electrician at the end of a job, and that tells me it's been installed as per the relevant regulations for electrics. Alan B. Billy Wong. I've driven 200 plus miles for free for an initial site visit for a job that ultimately did not go ahead. An initial site visit is certainly not unreasonable. I'm sure you have, Alan. Personally, I'm lucky in that I live and work in an area that has a lot of work going on. So I've never really been tempted to do lots and lots without, asking to be paid for it. Typically, I will give someone an hour of my time if they're in the Edinburgh area and I think the job is viable. I'll go and meet them. My experience has been that over the last 16 plus years, I win about 1/3 of the fees of the jobs that I bid on. So that's just been the way it is. And sometimes it's because people, later on, they'll admit, oh, actually, we have a friend who's an architect. We just wanted you to give us a fee quote so we could check that their fee was reasonable. And you've got to grit your teeth and just think that is a profoundly nasty way of behaving. That if you know you're going to be employing someone and you're not going to be employing me, but you take me around to your house to spend my time talking to you and then giving you a fee quote, that's a lot of my time. To then just use that as, I think someone described it as a stalking horse. Someone who's never going to get the job, but is there to flesh out whether the person you want to employ is giving you a reasonable price. It is what it is, but personally, I'll give someone an hour of my time, but that's as far as it goes. Thereafter, I'm going to give you a fee quote. If you want my time thereafter, you have to foot the bill. Time is money. So I appreciate other architects may do things differently. That's fine. That's your right to do that. But I am, that's just the way I operate. I'm quite strict about that. Adam 2484. We want to move our driveway to between two trees which have TPOs. Man, try saying that fast. To let vehicles in. Trees are about 11 meters apart. Is it feasible? Are there any resources? Right. Again, depends if you're in a conservation area. Are they listed? You've got TPOs, so you probably won't be able to fill them. Driveways are for a single car. I think you can get away with something like 2.4 meters. But I think you probably would physically. What 2.4 is like a Tesco car park space. You would want more. But the other thing to consider is that the root system in a tree is usually seen as being as far out from the tree trunk as the canopy. So the leaves and the branches, the roots are out there. And if you damage the roots, 11 meters between the trees, if they have quite wide canopies, if they're big deciduous trees, then you probably don't have enough space, which then comes down to what kind of paving are you using porous paving that will allow the roots to breathe, or how is this being done? It's complex. I can't really give you an answer off the top of my head, and I don't actually know who you would speak to about this. Possibly an experienced landscape architect who would understand how to specify correct paving, or maybe use gravel. I don't know. I don't suppose it's impossible, but it's not something I have any direct experience with. So I'm sorry I'm not able to help you. But I think talk to your local planning department, ask them what they would expect to see. Maybe get an experienced landscape architect, landscape designer to see how do you build an area that you can drive over adjacent to trees. So that would be where I would start. I would start looking to get in touch with someone like that. Here we go. Alan B. Yes, I've been watching your channel for a few years. The skylight in the Edinburgh property video looked fantastic. Oh, skylight in the Edinburgh property video. I am trying to recall which video that is. Jog my memory, would you, Alan? Just let me know which video had a skylight in it in Edinburgh. I've been at this almost 4 years. I've made that many videos. I can't remember. Was it recent? Was it one I did in the last, say, 6 months? Christopher McKay, what's your preferred roof covering to an area exposed to higher winds? Edinburgh, indeed the east of Scotland, doesn't usually get higher winds. Now, I grew up in the west of Ireland. My father used to be a lighthouse keeper. Later on began to working in construction. But where I lived, it was so far west, the next parish is in New York. We got winds like you would not believe. We got wind that most people in the UK would never experience. Like 100 miles an hour was just something that happened, say, I don't know, 2 out of every 3 winters. My father told me recently that the big storm we had a couple of weeks ago, they had 114 miles an hour, which is a record. But still, it's not a record by an enormous amount. It's a record by, I don't know, 10, 15 miles or something like that. So in terms of what roof coverings I would specify for where I live and work versus if I was building back there, very different. So I don't know. I mean, traditional slates, usually fine if it's built properly. Tiles also, but with enough wind, that will come off. I use zinc. Again, depending on how you fix it down to the substructure, might be fine, might not. Again, with enough wind and enough force, it'll knock anything. So I don't know how to answer that question, but pretty much anything, I've used single ply membrane, I've used slates, I've used tiles, I've used zinc on my buildings, and I'm pretty certain any of them will be fine for what, the 1 in 100 year storm. That is how engineers typically design construction in the UK. When they're specifying roof beams, roof rafters, that sort of thing, they've got that storm in mind. But over the period of time that I've been practicing, which is 20 years now, the 1 in 100 year storm criteria, I think, has come down to something like 1 in every 10 years storm. They're just more frequent and more intense. And this has shown up in the size of beams that go into large openings. If you do a big wide opening for a big patio door at the back of your extension, I've seen it on my projects from like 2010, 2011, 2012, the beams they're using are now deeper and bigger for what is exactly the same opening size. And I've had this discussion with engineers and they say, yeah, it's because the criteria they're required to design for has increased and it's down to climate change. So there we go. It's not an easy question to answer. Alan B, how do you stop contractors making material design changes of their own accord? I could give cheeky answers about that one, but if I'm responsible for inspecting the site, I mean, I would always try to inspect regularly and just keep on top of them. But some contractors and subcontractors will sometimes just change things and they get missed. I've got a job at the moment where almost 2 years ago, a contractor put did not put the correct vapor control layer onto a zinc roof, and that zinc roof is going to have to be stripped, and it's going to be expensive. The main contractor has admitted the fault. They ordered the material, but their guy on site just never fitted it, and it only came out when the roof started leaking 6-9 months down the line, and we lifted a bit of it, and we discovered this waterproof material was not underneath the insulation in a warm roof construction. But at least in that case, the contractor put their hand up and said, "We made a mistake. We'll fix this." So there we go. But it's hard. That is the worst mistake I think I've seen a contractor. It's not actually the worst mistake. Is it the worst mistake I've seen a contractor make? I've seen contractors make some very expensive mistakes, but in the cases where they were very expensive, at least in those cases, the contractor went back and fixed them. I've also caught them making mistakes that could have been very expensive, but you don't catch everything. So that's a tough one. But essentially, you need to answer your question, you need a contract between the client and the contractor, and as long as the contract has clear terms, should be fine. In Scotland, the SBCC, in England, the JCT, the Joint Contracts Tribunal, have standard contracts. So that's really the answer. Have a contract. So even if a mistake gets made, as long as the contractor, it can be shown the contractor did not install what was on the drawings to be installed, and if the drawings are part of the contract, then you've got them, and they will have to come back and fix that. There we go. Alan B is replying to Christopher McKay, because 240 volts with wet fingers will kill you on an open plug. Light switches are covered over, but the 3-pin plug is open. That's very good practical advice, Alan. That's true. How many projects and quotes do you lose by someone taking your quote and saying they will do it for 20 quid cheaper after you have spent hours on the quote, isn't it? I don't actually know if that has ever happened. Now, I'm unusual among my professional colleagues in that I publish my fees on my architecture website. I have 2 businesses. I've got Real Life Architecture is now its own business because of the consultations, but my regular practice in Edinburgh, I've always published my fees. And there's a long story as to why I chose to do that. I did it back in the day because I was annoyed with people wasting my time when it emerged. They never wanted to pay the fees I was willing to charge. And back then I was charging a lot less than I do now. So I published a fee page on my website, and that actually has won me a lot of work because people see it's clear, it's transparent, they know what they're getting. And I don't know if there are people out there saying to their clients, "Look what this guy charges. I'll do the same and I'll charge you less," which they could. That's fair is maybe the wrong word, morally dubious, but they're within their rights to do it. So I don't know if that's the scenario you outline has happened, where someone has come back to me and said, "Yeah, we got your quote and we showed it to someone else and they said they'd do the same work for less." I don't actually think I've ever had someone say that to me. I always ask, if I don't get the job, I will always ask. People don't always answer, but when they do, it's usually something like, came down to personality, we just liked the other person, or this other person happens to be in our social circle, or a friend of ours has used this architect and we just think that that's a better match for us. And I have very seldom have I got to the point where I've had someone contact me, they've seen my fees, I've had a chat with them, I've met them in person, I've then gone and given them a fee quote for them to then turn around and say, "Actually, you're way more expensive," because they already know how much I'm going to charge them, or at least should know. Most of the time, I will have people say, your fees between you and the person we actually awarded the job to are much the same. There's not much different, but we like this other person for whatever reason, whatever it might be. So I've tried to get to the point in my practice where I'm not trying to win work based on being the cheapest. That is a recipe for disaster in any business. If you're trying to, win your work based on just being the cheapest person on the block. My fees are what they are. If you don't like it, fine. Don't call me, don't email me, because I'm not going to be flexible on them. That's my view on it. And I say, and I have words to that effect. Polite, please don't ask for a reduction in fee, as refusal may result in embarrassment. I think I put that on my website. But yeah, when people decide to hire someone else, at least in my experience, it's usually because they have some connection with the other architect, or that other architect impressed them in some way, or had a project that was closer to what they wanted than what I was suggesting or offering. So yeah, it doesn't always come down to money, and I've done my utmost to try and get away from that end of the economic spectrum where I'm trying to compete with people on costs. My fees are what they are, and I do the work that I do. And if you like the work I do, you can see what I'm charging because I publish it. So there you go. What have we got here? Part in Toy Story 2 when the old man repairs Woody. That is the longest username I think I've ever encountered on YouTube. Do you think new build hate is overblown or deserved. I live in one and it has issues with storage and some corners were cut. Thank God for the builder's insurance, but it's incredibly warm and cheap to run. So, excellent question. And it is, believe it or not, on the list of videos I want to look at this week and the topic I want to address this year, not this week, sorry, over the course of 2025 to get into that. There's a lot of information online. There's the Welsh fellow, the surveyor, ridiculous him, whose name escapes me, but I do actually follow them, and they've done a lot of going around and finding mistakes. But of course, it's their business to find mistakes. So he has occasionally shown buildings that are built very well, and if you know who I'm talking about, you'll find it. I'll try and see if I'm never going to find this guy online just now, but yeah, if you've seen this surveyor company, his channel blew up across socials over the last year or so, and they find new build houses that are built to a terrible standard, all sorts of mistakes. And there's a lot of people online talking about this, and it is a trope. It is now something that people just assume to be true universally, that a new build housing estate will always be built badly. And I don't think that's true or fair, but then we don't have accurate figures on this. And of course, if someone has a bad experience, they will talk about it. Whereas people who don't have bad experiences will just get on with their lives and not bother to talk about that. So yeah, I want to take a deep dive into it and actually see, can we put figures to this? Do we know how many insurance claims there are? Is that one way of working out what's what? Do we know if there are people suing contractors or people refusing to take possession of buildings because they're so badly built, or mortgage companies refusing to issue mortgages because their surveyors are saying that's a terrible house, it's been so badly built you couldn't possibly sell it on if you had to? So yeah, it is something to look at. The short answer is I don't know, because it's not an area of construction I personally deal with, but it's something I am interested in. Alan B, again, answering to Christopher McKay. Good question. I don't know, to be honest. Christopher McKay, we're building on a hill near Slemish, so we'll be exposed to the elements. Going full eco home to minimize monthly costs. What eco products have you found are widely praised but offer little benefit? Ooh. I mean, it depends what you mean by eco. All sorts of things have the word eco slapped on them, and whether they deserve it or not, I don't know. So are you talking about passive house? Because I am unsure. That's not to say I'm against it, but I'm unsure about how effective passive house will be in the long term. And there's also the issue of, in Scotland at least, the government are going to try and get passive house equivalent introduced, whereby all new homes have to be built to the passive house standard. And the small end of the construction industry, the smaller builders, are they able to do this because they don't have the experience necessarily? So eco products that are not really all they're cracked up to be. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. That's a very good question. I don't know. Dixie, I'm just conscious as well, guys. I'll let this run slightly past 9, but if you've got questions now, put them in the comments now, because I'm going to bring this to an end real soon. Dixie, have you any knowledge on the Help to Build scheme? Somebody else asked me this in the comments just the other day, and I have noted it on my to-do list of something to research. I don't know, to be honest. I presume this is along the lines of similar to Help to Buy, Help to Build. I don't know how it functions, know nothing about it. In fact, I didn't even know it existed until someone mentioned this the other day on one of my videos and the comments. It's on the list of things for me to research. So no, but I will have a look at it. Alan B, how do you work out your fees? Is it an hourly rate or percentage value of the estimated cost? I don't use percentages. I've never used percentages because I believe they can scare clients. That's my own view. And I know anecdotally, the number of architects who use percentages has been declining. I break the process into 6 stages, roughly along the lines of the RIBA plan of work. The first stage, the feasibility, I charge by the hour because I don't know how many times a client will ask me to change the drawings, but every stage thereafter is a fixed price, as long as we stick to the description in the brief. If we said we're going to do a 1-story extension, that's my fixed price fee for the planning, building warrant, tendering, etc. If the client announces, I found more money, we can now build 2 stories, fine, I can do that, but my fee will go up. And it's by negotiation. So that's how I do it. And I review my fees annually, just check what did I do over the last 12 months. Am I making or losing money on any of these 6 stages? And do I need to increase my fees to account for that? So yeah, it's a trial and error process. And I think it's that with every business, no matter what you do. You could be selling lollipops for all it matters. You have to sit down regularly and review, are you making enough money on your lollipops? That's just how it is in business. DW Visual. Is it this? Oh, we've got a conversation on the YouTube new home quality. Possibly, yes. Possibly, yeah. He's Welsh. He uses the word ridiculous a lot. He describes builders who can't build as winkle spanners. Very good, highly entertaining. But they have an entire surveying business whose job is to go around and find these things. So I think, without sounding like they're being cynical, their whole thing is going to be about demonstrating that they can find problems. And if you suspect you might have problems before you buy a new house, hire these guys. It's very clever. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They do an excellent job. Thank you. It's the exact character limit that YouTube allowed, right? Good. Alan B, are you, and that's your username. Are you talking about new home? Yeah, new home quality control. That's it. That's, yeah. Measure things being out by biscuit size. That's them. Yeah, they're brilliant. I love that channel. It's so good. Tune in there to cheer myself up. And whenever I see my guys on building sites making mistakes, because obviously there's far worse out there than the people I'm working with. And everyone can make mistakes. Every building firm I have ever dealt with has made a mistake at some point in time. The mark of a good builder is, do they put their hand up and say, yeah, we made a mistake, we'll come back and fix it, versus the people who just run away. Alan B, thanks for your time and thoughts today, and I look forward to seeing where your channel goes this year. Me too. I'm hoping 2025 is going to be an interesting year, and we might actually get some significant growth. Like I said, if you have any topics you want me to consider, put on my list of videos to make this year, let me know in the comments. Christopher McKay, for larger designs, have you considered getting the design made in VR so clients can experience the real scale of the design? No, I do occasionally work alongside another architecture practice who have done that and they do like distilleries and breweries and hotels and bigger stuff. I do a bit of consulting work with them from time to time, and they've done that, but it's not something I've done for my own designs. So yeah, that's us, guys. We've just passing 9 o'clock. So yeah, if you have any, we've 19 people on just now. If you have any questions, put them in the comments right now, and I'll do my best to answer them as quick as I can. But I am going to bring this to a close pretty soon. Majority of the houses in the estate have had their roofs redone at a cost of about 6,000. Thanks for the stream. Best of luck with the channel this year. $6,000 to redo a roof. That doesn't actually sound that bad at all. I mean, I don't know the context, but $6,000 to do any kind of work on a roof seems reasonable, unless they're all be done simultaneously and they're really getting value for money, or getting them all done simultaneously and buying all the materials in one go. It was some lining inside the roof. Oh, that actually could be significant if you're insulating inside the roof, or if you've got a vapor control layer or something like that, and you have to redo it. That's not necessarily easy. DW Visual Architecture, thanks for your time and discussion on the various questions. Much appreciated. No problem. Right. It has just gone 9 o'clock. I'm going to wrap this up, guys. It has been fantastic. I really enjoy doing this. The hour has flown. I love doing it. I'm going to do this more often. I'll try and get it maybe, I don't know, once a month. We'll have a catch up, questions, etc. But yeah, this will be posted onto the channel as a video. You can go back and watch it if you want to. So thank you all so much. I'm going to bring it to an end. It's been very good. We'll do this again soon.